They didn't send a message. They didn't call ahead. They just showed up. It was a Tuesday morning, ordinary by every external measure. My office smelled like stale coffee and air-conditioned ambition. I was reviewing a security audit for one of our high-profile clients when there was a knock on the glass. I glanced up expecting my assistant. Instead, I saw a man in a tailored gray suit standing too confidently for someone I didn't know. "Mr. Whitaker?" he asked, stepping, and before I answered, I knew what was coming before he spoke, some things you feel in your bones. He set a thick envelope on my desk, embossed with a law firm's name I'd seen once before. On a business card Diana had casually tossed onto the kitchen counter 2 months ago. The attorney's smirk said, everything. He'd done this before. He liked it, the surprise, the disruption, the power play. Divorce petition. Effective immediately, he said, loud enough for the junior associate in the hallway to hear. I didn't flinch. I reached for the envelope, not to open it but to move it aside. Then I slid open the bottom drawer of my desk, the one I kept locked. From inside, I retrieved a thinner envelope. White, unassuming, deliberate. Without a word, I placed it on the table and tapped it once with my index finger. "Give this to your client." His smirk wavered. Just a fraction, but I caught it. That envelope didn't contain anger or threats. It contained leverage, carefully compiled, time-stamped, legal. I had known this day would come. I had counted on it. As he left, papers in hand, expression unsure, I looked out the window behind him. The city kept moving. Cars honked. Pedestrians shuffled by. No one noticed that a man's marriage had just imploded in a corner office on the 23rd floor, but they'd notice what came next. My name is Troy Whitaker. I'm 44 years old. I'm a father, a veteran, and the founder of a private security consulting firm in Chicago. I've spent most of my adult life identifying threats before they explode, but somehow I missed the one sleeping beside me. I didn't go home that night, not because I didn't want to see my kids, God knows I did, but because I needed silence. Strategy requires stillness, and revenge. Real revenge isn't noisy. It's surgical. I drove to the old warehouse we converted into a satellite office for high-risk clients. I punched in my personal access code, walked through the motion-detected hallway, and sat at the back desk where no one ever sat but me. I opened the laptop, unlocked with two-step authentication, and pulled up the folder labeled Contingency DD for Diana. Inside were subfolders: financial discrepancies, hidden accounts, text transcripts, metadata from encrypted messages she didn't know I had access to, a signed letter, a scanned copy of a confidential deal with one of her mother's political donors. None of it was illegal to possess. All of it was devastating if used properly. I remember once, early in our marriage, Diana told me, "You're too quiet when you're mad. It's unsettling." She was right. Silence isn't weakness, it's warning. That day, when her lawyer left my office with that envelope in his briefcase, he had no idea what he was carrying. But she would. And when she opened it, when she saw what I had been preparing behind the calm exterior and steady job and polite smile, she'd finally realized something I had known for months. She had just declared war on the wrong man. Looking back, I don't think Diana ever truly loved me. Not in the way people mean when they say love. She admired me. I know that. Admired what I represented. At the time, I had just left military intelligence and was starting over in the private sector. I wasn't flashy or rich, but I had structure, I had discipline. I had potential. She liked potential. We met at a corporate security seminar in Boston. She was giving a presentation on high-stakes real estate investment. Her confidence was the kind that made a room lean in without realizing it. Sharp suit, sharper smile, $1,000 watch on her wrist and not a hair out of place. Afterwards, she approached me, not the other way around. Said she liked my questions during the Q&A. Said I didn't just ask about tech, I asked about human behavior. She was testing me from the beginning. We went for coffee that same evening. By dessert, she had already figured out where I lived. what contracts I was bidding on, and how I took my coffee in the morning. Most men would have been flattered. I was impressed. That was my mistake. 6 months later, we were married, a courthouse wedding, her idea. Simple, efficient. Let's save the spectacle for when we actually build something. I thought that was pragmatic, realistic. Now I know. It was transactional. I remember how my brother, a quiet man himself, pulled me aside after the ceremony. He looked at Diana across the room, then back at me and said, "She's not clapping because she's happy, Troy. She's clapping because she won." I laughed. Then I changed the subject, and now that voice echoes louder than ever. The early years weren't awful. In fact, they looked almost perfect on the outside. We bought a home just outside the city. I expanded my firm. She grew her portfolio, flipping high-end properties and rubbing shoulders with developers, mayors, judges. Always moving upward, we were what people call a power couple. But inside the house, it was cold. Conversations were efficient. Passion was choreographed. And any time I brought up slowing down, maybe having kids earlier, she'd smile and say, "We're building an empire, babe. Timing is everything." And I believed her. I wanted to believe that her ambition was ours, that her connections would help me grow, not just serve her image, that the dinners with investors and late-night strategy meetings were for us, but it was always for her. I just hadn't realized it yet. There was one moment that still lingers. It was our 2nd anniversary. I had flown back from a high-risk assignment in Turkey. I'd been awake for 32 hours straight, exhausted, but excited to surprise her. I walked into our condo with a small box. Nothing fancy, just something personal. A watch engraved with coordinates of where we met. She looked up from her laptop, smiled politely, kissed my cheek and said, "You're sweet, Troy, but you didn't need to get me anything. We're past the gift stage." She didn't even open the box. I remember standing there, still holding it, wondering what exactly we'd moved into, if this was past something. There were moments when I felt like a guest in my own life, like I was being staged beside her instead of walking beside her. And slowly, I started locking pieces of myself away. A file here, a discrepancy there. Questions I didn't ask out loud. Documents I made copies of and kept in my desk. Not to use, just to have. I told myself it was caution. Now I know it was preparation, because somewhere deep down I already knew. She wasn't building a marriage. She was constructing a launch pad, and I was part of the scaffolding. It didn't happen all at once. There was no smoking gun, no lipstick on the collar, no late-night confessions. Just quiet changes. Subtle, almost respectful in how unspoken they were. She started leaving earlier for meetings, returning later from dinners. Her texts became shorter, colder. Her eyes lingered on her phone just a little too long when it buzzed. And when I walked into a room, the conversation sometimes stopped. Not abruptly, just enough for me to notice. I didn't ask questions. Not because I was afraid of the answers, but because I already knew where the questions would lead. In my line of work, pattern recognition is second nature. I'd built my career on seeing what others missed. Anomalies, small things. The way someone breathes when they lie, the delay in a keystroke, the glance before the answer. I was trained to see deception long before it takes form, and I was seeing. Now, in my own home, she had a new friend, Jeremy Coleman, tech entrepreneur, frequent guest at her fundraisers. "Jeremy just gets the digital space," she said once, as we sat at opposite ends of the kitchen island. "He's helping me restructure some of the back end on the Harrison property deal." She said it so casually, with the same tone she used when talking about a new gym membership or a dry cleaner. Like his presence in her world was routine. Looked up from my coffee and simply said, "Should I be worried?" She smiled, not warmly, professionally. "Of course not, Troy. You're paranoid by trade, remember? That's the thing about being married to someone like Diana. She never lies directly. She just tells you the version of the truth least likely to raise suspicion. It's harder to confront someone who's technically not lying, so I didn't confront. Compiled. At night, when the house was quiet and she was out networking, I started creating backups. pulling metadata from shared calendars, logging her travel timelines against client files, saving emails she thought she'd deleted. Didn't do it out of revenge. I did it because something inside me whispered, "You're not safe anymore." That voice, the same one that used to warn me when a mission was compromised, had been silent for years. But now it was back, and I trusted it more than I trusted her. Then came the password change. Our family iCloud account, the one we used to share photos, notes, reminders, suddenly locked me out. I asked about it the next morning. "Oh, must have been a security update," she said, buttering her toast like we were talking about the weather. "I'll fix it later." She never did. The next week she went on a last-minute work trip to Aspen, but her assistant posted a story from a beach in Cabo. A reflection in the wine glass showed two hands, neither of them hers. Both masculine. I didn't bring it up. I just saved the image, logged the metadata, and moved on. Because by then, I wasn't looking to salvage anything. I was preparing for the moment she'd come at me head-on. People think betrayal is loud, but the truth is betrayal whispers. It reshapes your reality slowly, like a house settling on bad soil. One day you look around and realize the walls are cracked and the foundations shifted. But it's been happening for years. And then one night, while she was asleep beside me, I unlocked her phone. She had forgotten to disable facial recognition. Didn't scroll long. I didn't need to, because there, in a folder labeled simply K, was a PDF of a draft custody agreement, dated 6 weeks ago. I sat there in the dark, staring at her outline under the blanket, and I remember thinking, she's already halfway gone. Most people think leverage is about information. It's not. It's about timing. Information without the right moment is just clutter, but in the right hands, at the right time, it's a loaded weapon. The morning after I found the custody draft, I didn't say a word. Not to Diana, not to anyone. Instead, I went to the office 2 hours early, unlocked my desk, and opened the bottom drawer, the one I had retrofitted with a biometric scanner. Inside was a sealed folder I hadn't touched in over a year. It was labeled in my handwriting, when I placed it on the desk and opened it with the care of someone disarming an old landmine. Inside were 3 items: a signed document from Diana, transferring partial ownership of our consulting firm back to me, a move she had forgotten in the rush of closing a tax deal, a notarized agreement we'd used during our first investment. Together, it clearly listed her role as strategic advisor, not co-owner. An authorization letter buried in corporate paperwork, giving me full decision-making rights in case of marital dispute. None of it was shady. All of it was real, legal, traceable, and, above all, overlooked. I remember when she signed those papers. We were in Napa at a client's retreat. She didn't read them, just sipped her wine, laughed, and said, "You always handle the boring parts so well." I smiled back then, watching her initials scrawl across the lines, and thought it was love. Now I realize it was convenience. She didn't see me as a partner. She saw me as infrastructure. And like any good architect, she assumed the foundation, would never push back. That day at the office, after the lawyer left, I didn't go into a rage. I didn't slam drawers or curse at the walls. I did what I've always done when the mission changes. I adapted. I opened the digital vault on my workstation and added the latest file, custody draft, final PDF. Then I printed a copy, slid it into a plain envelope, and added it to the stack. There were now over 20 documents in the drawer, financials, screenshots, phone records, time-stamped logins, and one photo. Just one. It was a picture of Diana and Jeremy standing close at a charity event, his hand resting just a little too comfortably on the small of her back, public enough to be dismissed, but clear enough to change the tone in a courtroom. I wasn't planning to humiliate her. I wasn't even planning to use most of it. Not yet. I just needed her to know I wasn't defenseless. You see, there's a misconception about men like me, men who don't shout, who don't post revenge online, who don't fight dirty in public. People think that makes us weak. They confuse patience with passivity. But let me be clear, I wasn't quiet because I was unsure. I was quiet because I was ready. That drawer didn't just hold documents. It held the end of her strategy. She just didn't know it yet. And when her lawyer came into my office with those divorce papers, thinking I'd be blindsided, thinking I'd panic, he had no idea I was waiting for that exact moment. He brought his envelope. I gave him mine. And in less than 48 hours, everything Diana thought she controlled would begin to slip through her fingers. I didn't build my life alone. And I sure as hell wasn't going to defend it alone either. Every operator, every strategist, every soldier has something civilians rarely understand. A network. And mine didn't wear suits or hand out business cards. They worked in the shadows. They owed me favors. And more importantly, they knew how to stay quiet. It started a year earlier. A friend of mine, Mark Dawson, former Army counterintel, reached out of the blue. He asked to meet for lunch, said he had something I might want to know. We hadn't spoken in nearly 5 years. The last time we saw each other, we were both testifying in a federal case involving surveillance overreach. At the diner, he sat across from me, hands folded, and said, "Your wife's been asking around about asset shielding and digital privacy protocols. Not for a client, for herself." At first, I thought he was joking. Diana had dabbled in all sorts of legal structures for real estate deals. Offshore accounts weren't exactly new in her circle, but Mark's eyes were steady. She asked. A guy I trained told him she was researching a scenario. The way she worded it, it wasn't hypothetical. That was the moment the drawer was born. I didn't panic. I didn't confront. I listened. And then I did what I was trained to do. I started building a quiet firewall. I contacted a former IRS forensic auditor. I once helped dodge a political scandal. She owed me. I asked her to monitor movement on our joint holdings. Nothing illegal, just notification flags on suspicious activity. I reached out to a cybersecurity expert I had mentored and asked him to recover all deleted email threads from our shared account backups, including the ones from her hidden iPad. I rerouted my personal messages and call logs through an encrypted off-grid server, and I started copying every document Diana signed without reading. She had no idea. Why would she? I was still making dinner on Thursdays, still taking Madison to piano lessons and Connor to swim meets, still laughing at her jokes at cocktail parties. She saw the version of me she wanted to see, the harmless, loyal husband with too much honor and not enough ambition. She didn't know I'd already identified her strategy. That I had studied, mapped it, and was 3 steps ahead. In early fall, Diana hosted a fundraiser for a judicial candidate, a family friend. I stood beside her, posing for photos, smiling on cue. But behind the scenes, I was collecting. One of the campaign interns leaked a donor list. I traced 3 of the names directly to offshore firms that had recent interactions with Diana's shell corporation. It wasn't fraud, not yet. But it was enough to raise flags if this thing ever went to trial. What most people don't understand is that defense isn't built in the courtroom. It's built in the quiet, in hard drives, in folder structures, in metadata. It's built in relationships, not the ones you flaunt, the ones who answer your call at 2 a.m. because you once pulled them out of a fire, literal or political. So when Diana's lawyer slid that envelope across my desk, thinking he was playing offense, he didn't realize I had already played my move months ago, and I was just waiting for the board to catch up. He walked out with a smile, assuming I was cornered. He didn't know that before the week was over, I'd start pulling the first thread from the fabric of her story. And once you start unraveling something built on lies, it never stops at the edges. It took less than 48 hours for the first crack to show. The same lawyer who had walked into my office with that smug, rehearsed delivery now left me a voicemail that sounded tight, nervous. "Mr. Whitaker," he said, "we'd like to discuss a potential alternative to the current terms. Diana is open to a more collaborative process, provided things remain private." I didn't call back. Instead, I sent a 2-line email. "Deliver my envelope, then we'll talk." That night, my phone rang at 12:11 a.m. Diana, I let it go to voicemail. Then she called again. I answered the third time, not out of obligation, but because silence in that moment was no longer strategic. It was surgical. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. No greeting, no apology, just that sharp, breathless question. I didn't respond right away. I let the static between us sit for a moment, like a second heartbeat. "You had your version of the story, Diana. I just delivered mine." She started talking fast, the way she did when she was cornered. "There's no reason to drag everyone into this. We can find a middle ground. This doesn't have to get ugly." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling of my office. It already did. "You just didn't notice because you were the one holding the knife." That silenced her for 5 full seconds. Then came the threat, veiled but obvious. "I know things, Troy, about your work, your past contracts. Certain clients might not appreciate scrutiny." And there it was, the moment she stopped trying to negotiate and started trying to intimidate. I let the silence breathe again. Then I said evenly, "I've already submitted copies of all relevant files to 2 attorneys and a federal contact. If anything happens to me, even something as simple as a tire blowout, those packages go public." She cursed softly under her breath, not out of anger, out of fear. I could hear it now, the way her voice shook just a little, the way the edge in her tone sounded more desperate than dangerous. She'd overplayed her hand, and she knew it. The next day, I got a call from someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Patricia Harrison, Diana's mother, a retired judge, and the real power broker behind Diana's moves. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "What do you want?" Her voice was like ice over gravel, cold and rough. "Justice," I said. A beat of silence. "You think you can blackmail me with half-truths and old records? They're not half-truths. They're full-page scans, sealed court documents, financial transfers, private meetings caught on camera. I don't need to blackmail you, Patricia. I just need to let the truth do its job." She hesitated, for the first time. And then she asked the question Diana never did. What would it take for this to go away quietly? I gave her 3 terms. Diana drops the divorce petition immediately. I get full legal custody of the kids. Blake, her brother, sells back his shares in my company at the original valuation. "And you," I added, "resign from any judicial boards or advisory roles before the week is over." Her voice turned brittle. "You're bluffing." I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to beg. I just said calm and final, "You already know I'm not." And then I hung up. For the first time since this all started, I wasn't reacting to what they did. I was controlling what happened next. And when powerful people realize you're no longer under their thumb, that's when they start to panic. Power doesn't vanish all at once. It unravels, one thread at a time. The first to break was Blake. Her brother had always acted like a bulldog, puffed chest, aggressive handshakes, fast cars bought on borrowed credit. He owned a minority stake in my company, a result of a deal Diana once orchestrated behind a smile and a bottle of red wine. He thought it made him untouchable. He was wrong when he realized the investigators were sniffing around his offshore accounts, the same ones I'd quietly flagged in the envelope I handed over. He cracked. He called me 3 times in one day. The first message was angry. The second was panicked. The third was pathetic. "Look, man, maybe we can meet, just talk, no lawyers." I didn't respond. Diana showed up at my office 2 days later. No announcement, no assistant. Just her, standing in the reception area, visibly rattled. Her jacket was wrinkled. Her hair wasn't perfect. And for the first time since we met, she didn't lead with charm. "You're ruining everything," she said, barely above a whisper. "Do you even care what this does to Connor and Madison?" I stood behind my desk, steady. I didn't yell, I didn't accuse. I just looked at her and said, "I'm doing this for them." She didn't have a response. Because the truth, when spoken simply, leaves no room to argue. The media whisper started by the end of that week. A vague but compelling anonymous tip landed in the inboxes of 3 well-connected investigative reporters, each one with just enough documentation to raised serious questions about a decade-old sealed case involving Patricia Harrison. I didn't mention Diana. I didn't need to. The documents spoke for themselves, and they were enough to start a quiet fire in all the right places. By Monday, Patricia canceled 2 public appearances. By Wednesday, she announced a temporary leave from her remaining board appointments. But the most telling move, she stopped calling. When Diana's legal team reached out again, they didn't come with threats. They came with terms. They offered shared custody, then full custody with monitored visitation, then full custody, no visitation, and a clean business separation, all under NDA. They were folding. Fast. We met one final time at her lawyer's office. The table was large, the room sterile. Diana sat across from me, expression stiff, hands trembling just slightly over the pen. She flipped through the documents, custody, business, assets, and signed each one without a word. When she was done, she pushed the papers toward me and said bitterly, "You win." I didn't touch them right away. Instead, I leaned in and looked her in the eye. "No, Diana, this isn't about winning. This is about truth, and before this ends, you're going to say it." She blinked. "Say what?" "Why you did all this." There was a long silence, then her voice hardened. "You really want the truth?" I nodded once. She dropped the pen, crossed her arms, and said, "You were never enough for me, Troy. I married you because you were useful. You had discipline, a company, a clean name. But I outgrew you. You stopped being interesting the moment you stopped being impressed with me." I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. I just nodded slowly and replied, "And yet, I just took everything you valued." She didn't respond. Her face flushed, but her mouth stayed shut. I gathered the signed documents, slid them into my leather folder, and stood to leave. But before I turned, I pulled out a second envelope and placed it on the table. "What's this?" she asked, her voice low. "Consider it a gift." She opened the envelope right there at the table. Inside were 3 photographs, all recent, all sharp, all devastating. The first showed Blake boarding a private jet with a woman half his age, her face mostly hidden, but her body language unmistakable. The second captured him withdrawing large sums of cash from a Cayman Islands account, one registered jointly in his and Diana's names. The third, he was on a yacht, shirtless, champagne in hand, already celebrating. Her hands trembled as she turned the images over, searching for something, a denial, an explanation, a flaw in the evidence. "This isn't real," she whispered. "It's real," I said. "The withdrawals were made 2 days ago. By now he's probably in Monaco. Whatever he promised you, it's gone." She didn't cry, not in front of me. But something inside her collapsed, quietly, with the same precision she once used to manipulate rooms full of men who thought they were in control. Now she wasn't in control of anything, and she knew it. I didn't offer her comfort. That wasn't my job anymore. I simply nodded once, turned, and left her there, sitting in silence, the signed agreements between us, and the truth finally laid bare on the table. The public reckoning came quickly. Within a week, Patricia Harrison announced her resignation from the bench, citing personal health concerns. But everyone knew. The court documents were no longer sealed. The Harrison name, once synonymous with prestige, was now trending on legal blogs and investigative podcasts. Federal inquiries were quietly launched. Financial audits began, and Blake? He became a ghost, flagged in databases, frozen out of his assets, and forced to hop borders under fake names. The woman he fled with left him the moment the money stopped. His name, once printed on gala invitations, now appeared on watch lists. Diana's collapse was quieter. She kept the penthouse, for a while, but eventually sold it. The cars went next, then the art, then the curated social circle that had once buzzed around her like bees to honey. She took a job at a mid-level real estate firm outside the city. No more champagne towers, no more high-profile listings, just open houses. And commission-based survival. Sometimes I hear about her through mutual contacts. She's quieter now, they say. Polite, humbled, still proud, but different. And I'm okay with that. I didn't destroy her. I just stopped protecting her from the consequences of her own choices. As for me, Blackstone Security is stronger than ever. The clients who once hesitated to renew contracts now reach out personally. The story of how I handled the Harrisons, calmly, legally, without theatrics, spread in all the right circles. I hired a smaller, tighter team. People I trust. People who've seen what happens when you stay silent just long enough for the truth to catch up. Most nights, though, I don't think about the company. I think about Connor and Madison, the way they laugh again, the way they run through the yard like they're chasing light. They don't know what I protected them from, and they don't need to. All they know is that Dad is here. Fully. Finally. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the trees, Connor tossed me a baseball and shouted, "Heads up, Dad!" I caught it one-handed and smiled. Not because I was proud of the catch, but because for the first time in years, I wasn't carrying anything heavy. Inside my office, there's one last item in the drawer. A photo. Diana, years ago, holding Madison as a newborn. I don't keep it because I miss her. I keep it to remember what trust used to look like and how dangerous it is when it's given to the wrong person. People ask me sometimes, was it worth it, the silence, the strategy? And I always say the same thing: justice isn't loud, it's quiet, calculated, and final.